Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. I often lament what role software has in change, and this is something that I return to. And here I'm talking about meaningful change. I'm talking about changing the way people think about things. I'm talking about potentially scientific analysis, potentially something where people can point to a piece of software and say, this actually changed the way we look at something. Now, even saying this out loud may seem ridiculous to some people, and that's why I think it's important to say it out loud. When I started developing Noble Ape 20 years ago, my hope was that it could create a degree of change that would change people's thinking associated with society, change people's thinking associated with war, change people's thinking associated with politics, just change people's thinking associated with a variety of things that people don't normally attribute to software. And in doing this, part of it is to create a narrative alongside the software that enables people to say, when this dot moves in this direction, this means this, and this has some understanding. And this is where it gets very elaborate and very interesting. It's not controversial to say, in fact, it's relatively trivial to say, that Facebook and social networks have changed the way in which people communicate. I think it's trivial to say that YouTube has changed the way people view information. Now, a majority of people don't use YouTube in terms of micro subscriptions, in terms of following a variety of folk out there. It's still very much associated with, million plus subscriber YouTubers, and probably, viral videos and cats and things like that. But there's a small number of us that use YouTube as a means of subscribing to a wide variety of independent content creators to view their content on a variety of different topics. And in this light, I find the potential for technology here, I'm moving away from computers to technology, to identify at least some kind of formative change. So let's return to this notion of software here, programmatic software, changing people's thinking about ideas that normally software doesn't impact. My perspective associated with simulation when I started Noble Ape was very, very idealistic. And what I found since has probably jaded me in a variety of different directions, primarily because I've shown people and empowered people through Noble Ape for a certain degree. And then they've wandered off, and if I check back on them in 2-year increments, I don't really see the level of change that I would hope or have anticipated through using this kind of software. And also the burden is on me, obviously, as the software creator, to put more wonder, more excitement, more interest in there. And some would argue, probably even me occasionally, the cutoff of doing this is probably within the first 5 years of the software's development. In this case, visualization, in this case, means of interaction, in this case, gameplay, all these kind of things would have assisted people early on with understanding the ideas behind something like Noble Ape. And even then, the notion of a game sometimes trivializes these things. I reflect, and this is my own mental illness here, associated with Will Wright's SimCity, SimEarth, these kind of simulation games that teach people, and The Sims obviously from Will Wright, that teach people a series of concepts that exist independent obviously of people understanding them, but to have this understanding conveyed to them in a play circumstance reminds them, perhaps. I mean, I guess people learn in different ways, and learning something, but actually then understanding that something is important, particularly associated with biodiversity, be it with regards to plants and animals, or with regards to, city ecologies. These are always important things. But increasingly, when I meet people that share the same views that I do associated with simulations, they're very curious people. And I start to wonder whether perhaps my belief systems are slightly askew, associated with thinking that simulation software could change people's perspective. Maybe I should be happy with the Facebooks and the YouTubes and the mass social networks slowly irking ideas through. And although I've lamented and narrated rather heavily associated with the political purpose of Facebook and how this is being utilized, I realize slowly but surely that maybe it will take another 20 years for the world to come to the same perspective associated with simulations. And maybe also this should define my work over the next 20 years. What I found very interesting, particularly working with the International Society of Artificial Life, is the academics who are tasked with not necessarily eulogizing this kind of simulation, but at least empowering this kind of simulation. They're a little bit far behind too. Will we work together? Probably not, but we might be able to work our way somewhere through this. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.